folks. Welcome to the Roundup. We're a Cowboy State Daily podcast, and we focus on really interesting people in the Cowboy State. Today's guest is such an interesting person. We started talking, I'm like, holy cow, you do a lot. And really a diverse and well experienced guest we have today in Mandy Fabel. Mandy is the executive director of Leadership Wyoming, which is a fantastic organization and really caters to business people, to leaders in Wyoming. Before we get started, though, I want to make sure that our podcast listeners and viewers know about another great podcast for business people, for entrepreneurs, for even news junkies. You're going to want to check out Wyoming's top business podcast, Business from the Basement, brought to you by the Wyoming Business Alliance. You can find them wherever you find our podcast here as well. And Mandy Fabel, Mandy knows about the Wyoming Business Alliance. Mandy knows everybody in the state. My goodness, Mandy, you are so well connected. You talk to people every day whose lives are about bettering themselves, about bettering their communities. And so I just wanted to say good morning, Mandy, and welcome to the Roundup. We're so glad you're here with us today.
Thank you, Wendy. I'm so glad to be here too and share some stories and have some fun.
Mandy, tell us about the Wyoming business, the back up, the Wyoming Leadership Wyoming. Wyoming is so blessed to have these really forward thinking people in every community. And back in the year 2000, a group of people got together and said, you know what? We want to provide resources, we want to provide training to leaders. Tell us the story of Leadership Wyoming, Mandy.
Sure. So, Leadership Wyoming was actually founded in conjunction with the Business Alliance. So, there's a lot of overlap there. So, you were right on. It was the then director of the Business Alliance, Bill Schilling, the president of the Senate, Eli Bebout, and then the president of the University of Wyoming, who got together. And there were similar programs in other states that they modeled it after, but they kind of put a very strong emphasis on making it a Wyoming program. And so, the idea was bring together 40 leaders from across the state so they can learn about the communities, get to know each other, and grow as leaders. And so the class of 2001 was the first class to graduate. And Eli was actually in that class. Senator Bebout was in that class, as was Senator John Barrasso and several other sort of prominent Wyoming figures. Bill often tells the story that they were really running the program more than he was. But that was the kickoff. And now, almost 25 years later, so we'll have our class of 2025 this year. The program is so strong and still doing what that mission intended it to do, which is to develop leaders, to help people understand the issues facing Wyoming, and to really embrace that mentality, small town with long streets, make those streets a little smaller, kind of bring people together and share resources, share support, etc. I came to the organization, I went through the class in 2017. We can talk about that too, but had a great experience, and then ended up becoming the director. Bill left in 2018, or I guess in the end of 2017, and I applied for and was able to become the director at that time. And then in 2019, we actually separated from the Wyoming Business Alliance and Heritage Foundation. And now they're doing great work. Rennie's a dear friend of mine. He's a director there and he's doing great work. And he's actually in one of our programs right now. And now we stand on our own with kind of just this focus on developing leaders outside of the political realm. We deal in political topics, but we don't have a political leaning or political agenda. So that's kind of the long and short of it, but I'm happy to dive into anything else.
Well, it sounds like to me the leaders and the people who go through the Leadership Wyoming program, I mean, they are well poised to be our political leaders. They're the ones who are poised to be in positions to make decisions on behalf of the rest of the residents here. Tell us a little bit about some of the things. In what ways does Leadership Wyoming train? What are some of the programs, some of the tracks that people who participate in Leadership Wyoming, what do they learn?
Sure. So we're most known for what we call our core program, which is a 9 month program. We meet 8 times in 8 different communities. And each month that we meet is 2.5 days. So we'll be in Gillette in a couple of weeks and we will tour a coal mine, we'll tour a power plant, we'll tour an oil rig, go to Devil's Tower. We'll talk about community development in Campbell County and in Gillette. We'll hear from industry leaders in that area and political leaders in that area as well. And so our real goal is insight, experiences, and education into Wyoming communities. We don't set out to create an advocacy agenda. So we're not saying we're not a PAC or an organization that says we want leaders to advocate in this way. We want people to have great experiences, understand the issues comprehensively or as comprehensively as we can, and then they can choose what they do with it. So for some people, they may choose to run for office. I mentioned a few at the beginning. Or they may choose to just be a leader in their organization or in their family or in their community. They may choose to step into a volunteer role. So, our real goal is that they have time to work on themselves. We're really fond of the saying, you can't read the label from inside the jar. So, you have to kind of get outside of the jar and work on yourself. But then also, this network they build first of 40 people in their class who become their friends, their confidants, their hype people, but then also the 1,000 person network of Leadership Wyoming alum, where if you meet somebody and they say, oh, I did Leadership Wyoming, now you have a shared experience. That's kind of our core experience. But in the last few years, we've also diversified. We have an all women's group. They actually just kicked off last week. So it's 25, 24 women, one in person meeting, and then several virtual meetings. And then we have a program we're running with the Wyoming Business Council that's focused on economic development. And then we also are advising / supporting a program through the University of Wyoming that's for college age students with the goal of helping them see Wyoming as a place they could land. So not just the drain to Colorado or wherever else students go, but seeing Wyoming as a place where they can reach their goals or have opportunity.
That's fantastic. I have to say, when you first started talking about how Leadership Wyoming works, I'm reminded in 2007, 2008, I was a member of the Park County Leadership Institute. And what you're describing is exactly what we did at PCLI, except for it's not 2.5 days at a time. And we got to do the same sort of things. Is there an association between the county leadership institutes and Leadership Wyoming?
That's a great question. We get asked that a lot. Structurally, organizationally, no, there's no affiliation or collaboration in an organizational sense. But we do work with community leadership programs if they have a question or they want to know what do we ask on our application or what are we teaching for leadership. We're happy to share resources or mentor them, but we don't have any sort of structure of formalized arrangement. But we do
Okay.
love when people sometimes people do their local community leadership program first. And then when they come to Leadership Wyoming, it's great because they know what to expect and they already have that lens of their community. So you don't have to do your local one first, but we always like it when people have that experience.
Well, I love what you're talking about with the networking. I still run into people who are in my class, my PCLI class, and you have that shared experience, but it's great networking. And I want to step back for just a moment, Mandy, because you were networking before you even started at Leadership Wyoming. You were networking. You worked for Knowles for the Outdoor Leadership School. Tell us a little bit about that experience. I want to kind of talk about you as well as Leadership Wyoming. Tell us about your experience with Knowles.
Sure. So I took a Knowles course. It was actually, I had been to Wyoming often as a kid. I grew up in Colorado and we adventured in Wyoming mountains a lot. My first real experience in Wyoming was taking a Knowles course between my junior and senior year of college. And at the time, I sort of treated it like my last fun thing before growing up. And then I guess the follow up to that is I've just decided I'm not going to grow up because I keep just doing fun things instead. But I
I
had
love
an
that
amazing
so much. I love that so much.
I had an amazing experience in the Absaroka Mountains 30-day wilderness course. It was the first time in my life I sort of was able to just take a breath and be at ease and learn and make mistakes and connect with people in this really special environment. And so when I went back to college, I kind of rethought some things. I thought I wanted to go into sports marketing. I had worked for the Dodgers for a season already and had a job opportunity there, and just kind of decided that wasn't the track for me. And so I decided to go to graduate school in Wyoming and work for Knowles. I was offered a job to work for Knowles at that time also. So I came back and spent several years working at first just summers until I graduated with an MBA, and then year round as well. And I think it was a fantastic window into how people operate. You know, you take people into the mountains for 30 days, and all of us will be stretched, challenged, tired, hungry, excited, all the things. And so, really, a great experience in human dynamics and in personal leadership. And it was my first real job. So, I didn't know it at the time, but I say now that the skills that I learned there really were skills that I would need in a business job, and in the more office or community environment, about managing myself, reading situations, managing risks, all those sorts of things. So I worked backpacking courses, rock climbing courses, and winter courses, which were my favorite. We would go out and camp for, I think the longest one I worked was 17 days. In January, and you have a little sled, you're carrying food and equipment, and then you build snow shelters that you sleep in. You melt snow for water. There's no external homes or yurts or fire or anything like that. You just live in the winter for a couple of weeks, and it's a lot of work, and it's really special. So,
Oh my word. I'm just blown away by this because I can't even imagine that. Obviously, the snow bug bit you because, Mandy, one of the things that people probably don't know about Mandy Fabel is that Mandy is sponsored by Polaris, which is just so cool. Mandy, tell us about how you got hooked up with such a huge international snowmobile company and what you do for.
sure. So I love talking about snowmobiling. So I hope everyone has like another, cup of coffee ready. I had ridden a snowmobile a little bit as a kid. My family actually spent a night out on the mountain in the Snowy Range Mountains. We got stuck in a storm when I was 12, and we slept in unprepared. We slept in kind of a snow shelter we had built, and we all ended up being fine, but it was a transformative experience for me. I think it probably led to that Knowles experience feeling so meaningful, of like, I know what it's like to not be prepared. What is it like to be prepared? Um, and so I stopped working for Knowles about 2014, and took a job with the Wyoming Community Foundation. And then a couple years after that, I had some family on Togety Pass. I live in Lander, and they were snowmobiling on Togety Pass, my uncle and my cousin. And they said, you should come out for dinner one night. I was like, well, do you have an extra snowmobile? I'll just come ride with you guys. Thinking that it would be similar to the sport I had done when I was 10 or 12. And I'm an athlete, I'll be able to just jump in and do it. And I was dead wrong. It's so hard. Snowmobiles have changed a ton in the last 15 years. And it's a whole new sport, essentially. But the bug you mentioned definitely got me on that trip. It was deep snow. It was so hard, but it was so fun. And I think really, if I reflect back on that time, I'd been that wilderness guide for so many years. There was something really delightful about being the beginner again, that other people were sort of taking care of navigation and terrain management. And all I had to do was like make sure I ate enough snacks and have a good attitude. So I kind of got hooked. I came home and told my husband I wanted to buy a snowmobile, which he was a little surprised by, because that wasn't our lives at all. But I convinced him eventually, and then eventually he has now gotten into snowmobiling as well. But I worked hard to progress. I'm pretty small. I'm not a big person. And so riding a 400 to 500 pound machine requires a lot of technique. I can't muscle my way through things. I have to learn good technique to do it. And so in that progression, I had the opportunity to become a Polaris ambassador. And now I'm kind of ambassador athlete. I do a couple different things for them. So backcountry riding, I help them on their photo shoots, or events that they have, and then take people who want to learn and want to get better, and just be kind of a friendly face of the sport. There aren't that many women. It's changing a little bit, but there aren't that many women who are pushing the envelope of trying to ride at the highest level and overcoming size and maybe stereotypes and things like that. So it's been a ton of fun I started in 2017. So the past 7 years or so, getting better and learning and being part of a really special community.
That is absolutely phenomenal, and I love it. I love that story. You mentioned your husband. Now, talking about stories, you have the coolest wedding story. You and your husband, Brian, have been
Mhm.
married for 10 years, and you got married in the most there's just not a better way to say it, the most outdoor way possible that you and your husband could have gotten married. Please tell us your wedding story because it's just great.
Okay. Oh, well, that's another story I don't actually ever get tired of because it was such a perfect day in our lives. Well, 2 days really. Um, there was this sort of trip that we had been talking about for several years, with the idea being that you could leave your house in Lander on a bicycle and then climb a route in the Wind River Mountains, and specifically in the Cirque of the Towers, completely human powered, so not ever using a car. Most people drive around, go to Big Sandy, and hike in that way. And so we had talked about it for a couple seasons, and it had never happened. And then that year, we were at a few different weddings of friends or family, and we had been dating for 6 or 7 years at that time. And we owned a house together, and we had both kind of said we wanted to get married, but we didn't really want a wedding because it's a lot. A wedding can be a lot. I have a really big family, and Brian has a pretty small family, and we just couldn't picture like what would feel like it was us. And so we came up with this idea. We're actually driving home from a friend's wedding, and we came up with the idea, what if we just did the human powered ascent of Pangora, but we got married on top? And so that's what we ended up doing. We left our homes in Lander on bicycles. We convinced a friend to become a officiant online and come with us. So he was our officiant, and he did the whole thing with us. We biked up Sinks Canyon, which I think is 12 or 14 miles. And then we hiked in 26 miles, which is a bit of a trek when you come from the east side. We slept, I don't know, maybe 9 p.m. to 2 or 3 a.m., got up super early, and then hiked to the base of the climb, did the northeast face of Pangora, which is a 5.9 grade 4 climb. If you're not a climber, it just means it's a decent climb. It's not, what the Olympians are doing, but it's meant to take the better part of a day. It's not like it's not a simple climb, I will say. Um,
This is not a day hike.
no, it's not a day hike. It's definitely real rock climbing. So we did that. We got married. We made it to the top about 11. We got married, which was so great. I wore a dress that I had bought at a thrift store the week before, just kind of on a whim. Was like, this is a white dress, this will work. Then we rappelled down. We went back to our camp, and we had thought about spending the night, thinking like we'll be tired. We hiked all day yesterday. We climbed all day today. We'll go back tomorrow. But there had been a pretty big forecast of a snowstorm. And because we had tried to go light, we didn't have a ton of warm gear. And so it was two, I think it was two when we got back to our campsite. We kind of did the math, and we were like, we could be home by 1 or 2 a.m. Like maybe we should just go for it. And so we did. We hiked out that afternoon and evening. We were a little delirious by the time we got to the parking lot at Bruce's Bridge. Rode our bikes down and got home, I think, at 2 a.m. and then slept, thinking we would sleep forever. And we woke up at 7 a.m. ravenous, like so hungry. So we then proceeded to just like eat our way through the day and make a bunch of phone calls and tell our family that we had gotten married. So
That is such a great, great story. Oh my gosh. So Mandy, you've got so many of these wonderful stories. You actually are a storyteller. You're an author. You have written a couple of books. Tell us about your books. Tell us about what's the content of your books and who's your audience. And obviously we want to know where we can find, but tell us about the book.
sure. Thanks, Wendy. I didn't mean to become an author or write a book. During COVID times, I had written a few things for our alumni, just sort of trying to connect with them and recognize that it was a chaotic time and decisions felt hard. There felt like a lot of wrong answers and not a lot of right answers. And so I told a few stories from my time at Knowles. I also had like dressed up as a unicorn that I walked around in Sheridan, which is another long story. It's in the book, so maybe that's a good teaser to buy the book. But I had written quite a bit for our alumni, just weekly emails. And one of our alumni worked for the Sheridan Press, Kristen Sabon, and she asked if I'd be interested in writing a column. And at first I said, no, I don't think so. And then she didn't respond to that email, and I just kept sitting with it. And I finally wrote back and was like, okay, I think I want to do it. And so it was a big step for me to commit to a couple columns every month, and it's a printed paper, so there's no like pushing deadlines. But it's really good exercise and very cathartic process for me to just write and reflect and share stories. Some of them personal anecdotes, some of them about other people, leadership lessons. And then after maybe 2 years of that is when I connected with the Cowboy State Daily, and they asked if I would write for the online news as well, and just opinion pieces. So I've been doing that. I try to do one a month. Sometimes it doesn't happen in my busy world. But the books that I've published are actually just a compilation of those articles and essays. So they're short stories. Some of them make you laugh, a couple might make you cry, but a lot of them are about sort of finding yourself and being the best version of yourself, which I would say through all these kind of weird chapters of my life that I've had, that's the common thread is helping people see potential in themselves and then giving them time and space and encouragement to reach that potential. And I think there's no better place in the world to do that than Wyoming. And I feel so privileged that that's a big part of what I get to do every day.
We were talking about this before we got started recording, but that is a gift of Wyoming. You can truly write your own story here. I mean, I'm living proof of this, Mandy, you're living proof of that. Do you talk to a lot of people about exactly that, about how great and how fertile ground Wyoming is for kind of inventing yourself in that way?
I do. I think especially when I'm around younger people and maybe they've grown up here, and I was that way. I grew up in northeast rural Colorado, and you all the things you don't have, and then I moved to a city to go to school. Was outside of Los Angeles, and I realized that my weekends were spent at the lake and dirt biking and skiing and adventuring, and their weekends were spent at the mall, or it doesn't feel like a great place to I sort of have that gratitude later. And so when I talk to young people here in Wyoming, I often say, you can move away to Denver or Chicago or anywhere. And yes, there are more jobs, but there are also a lot more people competing for that leg up in the next job. And in our Wyoming Academy program, we talk about we don't really have a JV team in Wyoming. Like as soon as you're ready, you're on varsity. And so we want to keep people in the game, and we want to, give them support and hopefully keep them from burning out or being exhausted. But it's also a great place if you're someone with drive, confidence, and a willingness to try things, which was the case for me when I was hired in this job. I was early 30s. I'm sure lots of people looked at me and thought, there's no way she has the skills or the abilities to do that job. And I probably wouldn't have gotten this job in another state. There would have been other people who wanted it, or more, competition or experience. And so if you can find those windows, there's so much opportunity. And I've found that if you're willing to work hard, people will give you a chance. There's not I haven't felt that I've had to overcome barriers of being a woman or being a young person, or things that sometimes I think have factored into other people's careers. Actually, I think here in Wyoming, I know it's not always true, but for my personal experience, people give you a fair shake, and I think that is so valuable. So I do try to talk about that, and I like to say, you can't be the victim and the hero in the same story, and so you kind of have to choose your path and chart the course that you want to. And there's a lot of wide open space to do that here.
That's a great absolutely. Wide open spaces gives us all of those opportunities. I wanna talk real quick. You've got a YouTube channel, is that right? Of granola and gasoline?
Mhm.
That is so fun. I mean, what creative I love your color scheme, by the way, and you've got just really interesting thing. Tell us what if we wanted to follow you on granola and gasoline, what will we see if we log on?
Sure. So that came out of, as I was getting into snowmobiling and my husband was too, we realized we had these two friend groups, kind of our granola friends from the rock climbing world and our gasoline friends in this new, moto world. and they were skeptical of each other, like, oh, those, those hippies or those rednecks. And we realized from our seat that there was way more in common than there was different between the two groups. And so we created Granola and Gasoline to sort of make fun of ourselves, kind of let us be the butt of the joke. So there's a lot of fun joking and teasing, but also just to chronicle our adventures in different activities. So there's some videos about mountain biking, dirt biking, snowmobiling, rock climbing, all kinds of different things, and hopefully trying to break down some of those stereotypes or silos that these two groups think they don't have anything in common, motorized and non-motorized. So we have a YouTube channel and an Instagram channel that people can follow along. And really, it's just to have fun and sort of chart our adventures along the way.
That is so great. Now you've embarked on a new adventure. You are mom now. You've got a 3-year-old son named Stokes. And tell us how Stokes fits in to Granola and Gasoline and to all of your adventures. I mean, is he on his own? Is he on his own motorcycle now? Is he on his own snowmobile now?
He doesn't have a motorcycle yet, but he does have a snowmobile for this upcoming season. This first winter, he had nothing because he couldn't sit up. He was born in August, so he couldn't sit yet. But by the time he was 1, he had a little like pull sled that we would take him to daycare every day on. We only lived 2 blocks from daycare, so it has a little steering wheel, and he just sits there, and we'd pull him to school in the snow. But this year, going into the season, we have a little 120 that we bought this summer. So he'll ride it a little bit. We're a little selfish in our riding. We like to go ride pretty hard. And so he won't come most days. He'll hang out with a sitter or some friends. But we'll take him every now and then and sort of teach him how it works. He also has a little front loader tractor that he drives to school himself every day now. It's really adorable. He's like out on the road waving at the cars, parking it right in front of the daycare going into school. So but he certainly has plenty of granola adventures too. We hiked into Big Sandy Lake this summer, which is about 5 or 6 miles, and he hiked some of it, and we carried him for some of it, and a couple other camping trips. He goes to the climbing gym or goes up climbing with us, and maybe our favorite thing to do together is mountain bike. It's called a shotgun seat, and it goes right in front of my seat on the mountain bike. And he has his own little handlebars, and then he sits on his own seat and has foot pegs, and then I pedal. And many people get an e-bike. I haven't justified the expense of an e-bike for like the 2 years he can do this, so I just work hard. But we go do technical trails where we'll go off little drops or jumps, and he loves it. He's just like chatty and noticing things and having the best time. So it has been, being a mom has been awesome. It's challenging, it's rewarding, it's big things, it's small things. But I would say getting to do the things that we love with him feel really special. So
I think that is absolutely awesome. What a unique and such a rich childhood you are offering your little boy, and I just think that's
baby,
phenomenal.
the other day, someone asked him, Stokes, what's it like to grow up with two children for parents? And I was like, that's kind of true. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. We don't know.
But
A lot
I
of
love that.
silliness.
I love that about you and the way your approach to life is, this is all fun. This is
Mhm.
all fun, and it's all an adventure. And I wanna circle back around to Leadership Wyoming, and tell me about how you incorporate that attitude as the executive director. How do you make sure that that's the kind of experience that the people who come to Leadership Wyoming walk away with?
Yeah, it's taken me some time to find the right lane for this. I think because I was young when I came into this job, I sort of thought that I needed to be all business and needed to sort of have these impressive experiences for people. I knew that I wasn't impressive, so then they needed to have these impressive experiences. Um, and I've kind of come to realize that they can get those a dime a dozen, but the chance to have a couple of days to kind of take off the weight, the vest that we all carry, that is the weight of responsibility of jobs and family and community and big issues with not easy solutions, that sometimes being silly or playful or laughing are things people haven't done in longer than they would like to admit, or at least not as regularly as they would choose to. And so we try not to overscript it. Things can get a little kitschy or a little, cliche when you're trying to force it, but we try to leave a lot of room for people to have fun. So in a couple of weeks, they'll be throwing axes at the Axe House up in Gillette and, laughing about that, I'm sure. And it just seems to give people permission to relax, and just remember kind of who they set out to be. And I think as leaders, one of the best gifts that we can give people is that when we're authentic in our own skin and comfortable in who we are, we can give that permission to other people. And whether that's to be silly or to be serious or to take risks or to not take risks, it can go a lot of ways. But I think that's something that, again, being involved in athletics and recreational sports, it sort of taught me, like, don't try to pretend you're something you're not, and don't worry about trying to be something you think you should be. Just be yourself, and that authenticity is actually more compelling than some curated version of yourself. So
That is such a great way to just wrap up this conversation because that was just inspiring. Thank you very much, Mandy Fabel, for all of that. I want to make sure that people know if they want to get involved in Leadership Wyoming, what do they need to do? How do they contact you? Does it have to come from someplace local? Tell us about how to get involved with Leadership Wyoming.
sure. So all of our programs you can find on our website, leadershipwyoming.org, and you can reach out with any questions you have. They all require an application. So there's sort of stage deadlines starting January through April for the different programs. It is a competitive process, so it's good to set that expectation. We usually turn away more people than we accept, so it's important to know that going in. But you can get help from other alumni. You can call us with questions. We love seeing a diverse applicant pool and trying to kind of meld together the right class for the right year. Yeah, and then as you said, I personally, Granola and Gasoline is Instagram and YouTube, and then the website where my books are published or where you can buy the books is mandyfable.com. So
That's great. That's what I was gonna ask. So thank you
great.
for giving us that. Mandy, thank you for your time today. I know you've got 18 different things juggling right now, and we're grateful that you were able to share with us your story and the story of Leadership Wyoming. Good luck to you, and thank you for providing the service that you are and for the organization that you have.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. I really enjoyed chatting with you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you folks for tuning in today. We're so glad that you were able to join us for another Roundup podcast with another really interesting person from the Cowboy State. And we want to also remind you, if you are interested in business, if you've got a business, if you're thinking about business, you want to go to the podcast Business from the Basement from the Wyoming Business Alliance, which of course works hand in hand with Leadership Wyoming. We're so glad to have these amazing organizations here for us in the Cowboy State. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Don't forget, if you've got an idea for someone who should be focused, who we should focus on here on the Roundup, please let us know. Don't forget to tune in Cowboy State Daily every day. Have a great week.